This series of the Make Life Work podcast is supported by Little Warden. They monitor your website for the boring things that people often forget until it's too late, so you can concentrate on making more. Plans start from £25 a month, but Make Life Work listeners get an exclusive 60-day free trial, plus all the referrals will be doubled, especially for the mental health charity Mind. Get your account today at littlewarden.com/makelifework. Welcome along to another episode of the Make Life Work podcast. I am Cy Jobling at Cy on Twitter, and for this series I'm talking to people from around the tech scene about balancing work, life, well-being and side projects. This week I'm talking to Naomi White, a brand designer from Newcastle, UK. Naomi has been on a fascinating journey with her career over the past 15 years, establishing herself as a reputable designer with spin-off side projects along the way. So I thought she'd be an ideal guest for this podcast. Let's get into it. Welcome along, Naomi.
Thank you so much. Hi, Simon.
I am okay. It's Friday. Friday, as a lot of people call it.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm really good. New year, new starts and all that.
Yes.
Really good, thanks.
Excellent. So, new year. Any big goals you've got for this year?
Oh, my word, too many. Yeah, far too many. I think I do that usual thing of, making that massive long list and it's far too long and then feeling bad about yourself at the end of the year when you've only checked 2 of them off.
So how long are you talking? Are we talking 10 goals, more?
Well, I'm quite a prolific list maker in that I make a big point, but then unfortunately that ends up being 10 sub points, and
Right.
then those sub points have sub lists, and it ends up completely unachievable. So if I get anywhere close to the high level main list, I'll be happy.
Excellent. So if you can tick off the top level list, you're okay. But after that, I think we all fall into that trap. My tip on that one is write down as much as you want, then screw it up, throw it away and do the top 3 that you come back to mind.
Yeah.
Because they're the important ones that you will remember.
Right, I might try that after this.
I've been doing that a few times for the last couple of weeks. Got off tangent already. We warned about this in the starting. So, as I mentioned in the intro, you've been on an amazing journey finding your sort of niche in brand design. Can you tell us about that path that got you there? Why you focused on design specifically, and what attracted you to digital design as well?
Yeah, of course. Obviously, without going through my entire career, I did multimedia design at university, but it touched base on a bit of everything. We did sound design, web design, graphic design, but we didn't really do anything too in-depth animation. So when I was to move into the industry, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I was really fortunate enough to have a couple of interviews before I'd even graduated. And I got my first job at what is now a very large agency called Think, which is based up here in Newcastle upon Tyne, but they're now also based in London. And I started, so I got the job. The interview was successful and I got the job before I'd even graduated. So when I started there was only 7 of us, miraculously. Now it's obviously, I don't know how many numbers, but I'd guess at least 150. They're blazing ahead now. My first job kind of led me into what would be the start of my career, which was mainly web design at that time. And working with some great people around UI. I went and did a UX course at the University of Sunderland as well. And really got into UX and UI through that role. It taught me a lot. But I worked there for 3 years and I got a bit itchy. Got itchy feet and decided to move to London, as we all do when we're from the north. We think we need that bigger experience. And don't get me wrong, I don't regret it. I'm obviously now back up in the north, but I don't regret going down. I wanted to work with those bigger clients and also wanted a bit of a shift of scenery. So I actually moved down. I worked with an advertising agency, which was a WPP company at the time, Good Technology they're called. They're not around anymore. But huge company, massive change and shift in role. And yeah, wanted to take in exactly what happens with those bigger, wider TV ads coming down into digital. It was great, but unfortunately the role wasn't quite right for me. So in advertising, I learned the hard way that you get pairings of designer and copywriter, and those pairings then, come up with all of the awesome creative ideas. And then unfortunately, the single designers like myself end up artworking them. So it wasn't exactly what I thought I was signing up for. So we had lots of conversations with them. They were a great company, really lovely team. Well, multiple teams, but really lovely team who I work with, and they really did try and shift my role within the organization, but unfortunately there just wasn't quite the right role I was looking for there. So I ended up moving on after 6 months. I started looking for new opportunities, and 9 months later I moved on to Bostock and Pollitt, which is now Pollitt and Partners in Covent Garden, and they're a branding agency. I've been around since the 80s, extremely good at what they do, and I loved it. I really, really loved it there. So I worked on the digital side because back then it was still very split down the middle, and I had to, persuade the brilliant brand designers there that digital actually was just as important and just a biggest part of the story of the brand as, what they were doing. It was a wonderful role. I loved it there. Took in everything that I could through all three agencies, obviously. And then after working at Bostock and Pollitt for 2.5 years, so decided to, okay, maybe I could do, something for myself, because as much as I'd learnt fantastic and wonderful things through these agencies, I'd also seen everything that I wouldn't want to do with a client. As much as I love and respect those agencies, I saw the typical agency model, if you like, nothing to do with the specific agencies that I work for, but the specific agency model. I think, in my experience, I've just seen lots of flaws. We've all gone through them, no matter what, if we're on the design or the dev side, but having the multiple layers, for example, of account managers in the middle, talking to clients and feeding things back and vice versa, it never worked for me. So I was always one of those pain in the neck designers, if you like, who would just argue their way into client meetings because it didn't work. I didn't want that. I didn't want the lack of communication with the client. Things get diluted. They're not communicated in the right way. One tiny little thing might have been missing from that explanation, and that shifts the whole creative idea or the way that we start to build out a website, for example. So I kind of got the itch to think, well, okay, I'd really actually love just to work one-on-one with clients, and that's what I've been doing ever since.
Very nice. I like the fact that you've been through agency work the hard way, and you enjoyed it at times, right? I get it, but yeah, there are certain anti-patterns, I think, to what we do in the design and agency world that really put people off working in it. And as you found out, there are certain quirks you wanted to work around. So yeah, as someone who works in-house in a company, I work closely with product managers that are similar to brand designers, I guess. They've got a vision of what they want to do. But when it starts diluting through people, the message gets lost, the relationship gets broken, and you don't have that real relationship about what you're making is for and what it's for. So is that what your motivation was to go, I want to do this differently now?
Absolutely, yeah. And don't get me wrong, agencies are fantastic. They work. That's why there are so many of them, and that's why they are competition to me these days. A lot of the clients that I work with don't know whether they actually want to work with an agency or they want to work with an individual. It's a very different process. It's a very obviously cost-wise it's very different as well. So there's arguments on both sides, and the agency model works for a lot of people, but yeah, for me personally it's definitely a motivation for starting my own business.
Okay, so let's jump ahead a little bit now. So it was about 2010 when you went off and did your own thing, which is wow, 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's my 10-year anniversary this summer, and I can't believe it. It's very scary. I mean, I sound very old when I say this, but the typical thing of, the older that we get, the faster time seems to disappear, and, we're 40 before we know it. But it's been a wonderful 10 years, and it's been a real roller coaster of up and downs, which I'm sure we'll get into. But 10 years, yeah, wow. But I've worked with some really, really fantastic clients over that time, and it's been a lot of fun. And I just got asked yesterday, actually, why haven't I grown the business out into an agency? And I get asked a lot by, my friends and peers as well of, do you not want to grow that out? my answer to that is I love what I do, but I also love the way that I work. So I've continued to work one-on-one with clients throughout. Obviously, I don't do absolutely everything myself. So I partner up with other fantastic studios, individuals in, throughout the industry, whether that be other designers, illustrators, developers, animators. I partner with people all the time, but I pull together really small bespoke teams for specific clients and for specific projects. And I love doing that because the client gets the best of both worlds, because they get to work one-on-one with me all the time. I'm their only contact, but then the budget is there, for example, for extending a brand out, with a wonderful illustrator. Then that's, obviously what I'm going to recommend. And we pull someone in who hopefully maybe I've worked with before, or at least I know they have the reputation and the experience to know what they're doing. So I'm not putting the burden on the client at all. I know that they're a wonderful person to work with and trusted. So that's worked really well for me over the years, and I wouldn't want to change it. I really love, this podcast is all about balancing work and life, and it is a lifestyle choice at the end of the day. I'm not motivated by money. I'm motivated by the passion of wanting to do good on behalf of my clients. That's the key, really.
I love the fact you've just mentioned the word good there as well. So, as you say, you've been doing this for 10 years now. I think you rebranded last year, was it?
I did,
To
eventually.
the Branded by Naomi, lovely meta name. But in your tagline, it's "We create captivating brand systems for social good businesses," and it's that final bit that really caught my attention, because I love the fact you've focused in on something that you will feel passionate about. You won't feel dirty for signing up to clients that you can't quite agree with their morals. So,
Exactly.
was there any sort of examples over the last 10 years which made you realise this is what I want to do? And I need to make that clear to all my clients going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I've been fortunate enough that one of my very first jobs, when I was at Bostock and Pollitt, I worked on the Macmillan website. So I led the team that did a full website redesign for Macmillan Cancer Research. It was wonderful. And I worked with a particular manager at the time called Thomas. And Thomas, he then moved to breast cancer care, which is now regrouped with someone else and called something completely different. But breast cancer care at the time, Thomas had moved over there. He approached Bostock and Pollitt and said, "Is there any way that we can work with you for breast cancer care?" They said, "Unfortunately, conflict of interest, we can't do that." However, they were good enough to say, "Naomi's actually going out on her own, so why don't you speak with her?" And he was like, "Great," because that's who I actually wanted to work with, because the two of us had worked together on that project. So I was fortunate enough that one of my first projects was for breast cancer care. Now, it was completely on the web side of things. There was no branding at that point in my company. It was very much, they hired me for a web redesign and, all of the lovely content stuff that comes around that. But I was fortunate enough to start there. And because of that work, but also because of having a lot of contacts within that industry, I worked with a lot of charities and non-profits in the early days, scattered in with a few companies that did random things like dentistry hardware, for example, was an early one, which was B2B, not, wasn't the typical B2C, it was B2B, it was very internal, it was very techie. But I was still fortunate enough that throughout my 10 years, I've always, at one time, pretty much, I've always had a charity, social enterprise or non-profit on the go as a client, and it's just been a constant string, and I've really, really enjoyed that work more than anything else. So yes, as part of the rebrand and repositioning last year, I was really keen to shift over to only working with social good businesses. Now, of course, there's lots of other businesses that come into that. So at the moment, I'm working on 2 rebrands at the moment. One is for a company called Social Engine down in London, and they do wonderful work in gathering evidence behind social behaviour to then help progress society, if you like. So we're still working on their strapline, you can tell. But they work with all sorts of people. They work with councils, they work with the fire brigade, for example, on evidence around why house fires start. and trying
Right.
to help understand the social behaviour around it to then try and get to the crux of the problem. Then on the other hand, they work with the council and the forestry board, for example, on why people are dropping litter. So, you've got a completely social good company there, finding the evidence, bringing together groups of people, doing all of that research and doing huge reports on it. I mean, these reports are really, really substantial.
Right.
And then on the other end of the spectrum, my other client I'm working with is actually a local client, which I don't work with local people very often, which is ironic, but they're up here in Newcastle, and they work with food data. And so they work with manufacturers, wholesalers, caterers and retailers, and they are a hub for food data. So obviously with all of the issues that we've had, especially in the last few years with allergy sufferers and people unfortunately eating something that's then caused their death, for example, we've had a lot of laws change over the last few years, and they are there as the one place that you can go where they gather all of the data from all of the manufacturers on every single individual product that they make, that they create in their factories.
Ooh.
And they share that across the rest of the food industry. So it is B2B, but actually myself and Rose, who are working on it, are just, you need the consumers to know about you as well, because what they're doing is really, really, it's saving lives. But obviously their core audience is the food industry themselves and the businesses, but they are doing wonderful, wonderful work. So yeah, so as much as charities and non-profits have been, a lot of my client base, then I've been fortunate enough there are a hell of a lot of social good businesses out there really trying to change things and progress things, whether it's in the food industry or whether it's, for the local councils, for example.
That's really interesting. Your first project you talked about there, bringing together all that sort of social engineering stuff from around the local councils. I remember when I started pretty much my career actually in the fire service back in 2003. It's going way back.
Were you in the fire service?
Yeah, I worked in their tech department, working on the website, on internal tools.
God, you
But
don't
one of
even
the
think about that, do you? You don't think about the other people behind the scenes aside.
exactly, and there was a huge group of people working on stuff. The first project they gave me was to create a brand for the arson task force. So it was working with the police and the fire services to kind of establish a bit of a brand, a bit of a direction, and how to promote themselves. And I love that work. Like you, it's just you feel good. You're giving back to society. You can't find fault in what you're trying to do there because it's preventing crime and fires and all the other good stuff you're trying to do. So I relate to that, and I remember how I enjoyed that work. Then you start doing more B2B retail stuff. You're like, oh, this doesn't feel right. Working in insurance, for example, that was not the finest time of my life. Not I don't think anyone can say insurance is in it for the right reason. But yeah, that conflict and of interest and switching between different brands. I like the fact you've got the luxury of just choosing to work with these people now. So do you find they come to you, or do you go out to tender to them, or is it a bit of a mix for you? I don't know how it works.
Simon, I've been absolutely terrible at self-promotion my entire 10 years. Well, I'm sure we'll get into that more, but I've been really, really bad. And that was part of the reason I did the rebrand last year as well. I mean, I had zero, people didn't know my work. You'd look me up and you'd find a couple of photos from speaking events that I'd been at, but that was it. My work wasn't out there. And that's always really frustrated me because I am a workaholic. I do not stop. So the realization hit last year that I needed to focus and really get what I do out there a lot better. As you know, we all do it. We all say it. Our own brand and our own work is the last thing that we look at. We do put clients first, and I have put clients first. I still do, obviously. But I needed to actually take some time out last year. I took a good 2 to 3 month chunk out to do to do this repositioning, because it is really important, and I can't expect to work with specific people like I'm talking about if I don't have the right tools out there to showcase what we do. But yeah, I've been fortunate enough that they've all come to me because I've been pretty invisible. And a lot of the work and a lot of the clients I've worked with has been word of mouth. So it's been, I've worked with someone and that's led to working with someone else. And I think that's the wonderful thing with working with clients one-on-one. You don't really get that in agency land. You know, we end up pitching for things over and over again and going up against the same people in pitches. I haven't done a pitch since breast cancer care, since that first project.
Well, you've not had to, have you? It's great.
No, I think because your reputation precedes that. I mean, if someone wants to, if they've been recommended you and they've seen the work that you've done for someone else and they're impressed, it tends to just happen. As long as the price is right, obviously.
Naturally, right? You got a value, right? There's a couple of things you mentioned in there. Actually, I want to put a pin in the one about taking the time out. We'll talk about that in a moment. You also mentioned about the talking, doing the conference scene. So this must be going back 10 years or so, I reckon now, maybe a bit more. What got you into that, and how did you find the whole conference world, as it were?
Speaking world, yeah, it's a funny one. I kind of fell into it, and to be honest, I think I fell into it for the wrong reasons.
If you don't want to talk about it, that's fine. I get it.
It's interesting because I was a conference goer from right at the beginning of my career. Like when I was still at university, I was going to conferences and throughout my years at Think. And I was a very quiet person who would sit at the back, take lots of notes, then take those notes back to my agency and do a presentation on them back to everyone else so that everyone else could learn, obviously asking those agencies to pay for me to go as well, which was nice at the time. But so I'd spent a good 6 years, at least 6 years, going to these conferences before, you know, actually starting to speak to half of the people that were there and speak to other speakers and that kind of thing. And the more friends that I made within these conferences, the more I got encouraged by the conference organizers to speak, because I'm relatively confident. So I kind of got coerced by, I think, organisers of speaking events to give it a go, do it. And I do. Looking back, I actually have taken a break from speaking in the last 3 or so years. I've come back to it just this last December, and I may have something in the pipeline this year. But I actually took a break from it because I realised I wanted to level up the way that I go about speaking, because it's one thing it's fantastic PR, obviously, and you meet amazing people and it's an amazing environment. But unless I get at least 50% of that audience taking something good from that talk, taking inspiration, taking motivation, feeling driven from it, or taking some, 2 or 3 key messages home that they're then going to put into practice, there isn't then any point in me being there, because that's just self-obsessive. That's just me being there for my own reasons and my own PR rather than the good of the audience. So yeah, I didn't ever do a lot of speaking for that reason, because aside from this, when I say I'm relatively confident, I am in the way that I come across, but obviously, like the majority of us, I have a lot of self-doubt that goes on, and I'm never ever happy with what I do. So as much as I'm saying this is just, there's part of me that is an inner critic all the time. So some of the talks, have gone much better than others. Some have had a lot more effort put in than others. And, a lot of people have taken some really good things from them. But I'm always my worst critic and always want to do better. And I got to a point with it that, I wasn't doing loads, probably 1 or 2 a year, but I'd done enough that I knew that actually now it's time for a break and time to reconsider exactly the kinds of messages that I want to push out there.
So I guess that was a good opportunity for you to take that break that you talked about, the 2 or 3 months, reposition yourself in the market, think about your brand, your message, who you are, what your core morals are, and all this sort of stuff. And then out comes Branded by Naomi.
Exactly. So yeah, Branded by Naomi, and working with social good businesses, and a few other side projects which I suppose are similarly in line with the morals that sit within the company too.
Nice. So before we go into the upcoming projects, back in the day you created a shop in Newcastle called Who's It and What's It. Great name. Hard to say, but great name.
When we say it, sounds very Geordie. Who's it and what's it?
It does, yeah, it definitely needs the accent, I think. Not my drove Midlands accent. So yeah, what sort of provokes that idea? Because I love what you were trying to do. You were trying to bring together like nearby creatives that weren't digitally minded. It's real tangible things that just didn't get the platform. So can you tell us a bit about where that came from and where it went.
Yeah, of course. It's a very long story, so I'll try and keep it a bit shorter.
We've got 5 seconds. No, I'm joking.
Good luck with that. In late 2012, I'd been working for clients obviously for a good 2.5 years ish, and really loved what I did. But with our work being so digital and often shifting online as soon as you put it out, as we all know how it goes, I felt like there was a bit of a gap in what I did. And like much of us, where we have our kind of day job and our passion and our skill set of what we're good at, what we're experienced in, and what we make money from, there's this side itch of, I love tangible design. I love product design. I also love renovations and buildings.
Okay.
But that comes into it. But I love a physical space and physical product, and it ended up morphing into a much bigger idea than what I first thought of. Oh, well, maybe I should start, designing some physical product. It actually morphed into a much bigger, almost legacy kind of idea of building a community for independent designers that sell physical product that we all knew really well within the industry, but that the general public don't know. So I started to think about, could I create a physical retail store that wasn't the typical physical retail store, but that sold wonderful physical product from independents and brought those to the high street rather than, the bigger chains and all of the things that we're used to seeing. So I started to look at buildings, and I started to do a lot of research and collating of, how does the normal wholesale model work, that kind of thing, and kind of started to get really really excited about the fact, or annoyed about the fact, I should say, that the wholesale model really isn't, some people it works for, but to me the wholesale model is a bit dirty. Like it doesn't give back enough to the creators, the makers, the designers, or illustrators. It takes much more, and the retailers need a lot of money to be able to keep that retail business going. So because of that, I started wondering about models, and what about if we shifted away from the wholesale model and we created a subscription model where designers could pay a very small monthly fee, like £30, for example, and they could get a whole number of products or a range within the store. And then for that, we would give them 100% of their profit back. So it's like us basically being a silent partner, being there as a store front for these people, but giving them the majority, if not all, of the profit back, aside from card fees, if people pay on card, for example. So I started to get really passionate about it, obviously, and then I got led into looking at buildings, looking at opportunities. The potential for the model meant that we needed something big for it to work, because we needed a whole number of products in to make the model work. High street stores and retail is, I can understand why, the saying of the high streets are dying. I don't believe that they are. I think behaviors are shifting, and they've shifted rapidly, which looks, has caused some businesses to fail because they haven't been quick enough on the digital pickup of things. But at the time, we're talking 2012-13, it was pretty dire up here as well in the northeast, and the high street did feel very sad almost. So I did a lot of research, looked into it, ended up going for a building on the quayside, which is in more of the tourist area than the high street, because it was actually affordable. Wow. But also we got a lot of tourism, and we have like the Baltic shop over the river, which is, a big modern gallery and shop underneath, which people love, and the tourism down there is huge, and there's also a Sunday market every Sunday, obviously. Anyway, so trying to move forward quick, we got in there. I did massive renovations with all of my family and friends. It took us a hell of a long time to get open. We had all sorts of issues, but we got it open in December 2014.
Yeah.
just before Christmas, like the 1st of December was our opening day. And yeah, I ran it, I co-ran it alongside my design business. So you can imagine how mental that was. I mean, it was 18-hour days. I was at the store 12, from 8 till 8 in the early days, because I didn't know when the busier times would be, because we were a one-off. We were a retail shop in the middle of restaurants. So how, we needed to know what the hours would be like, so we had to open for a longer period to be able to tell. People really loved it. We got really, really great feedback. The public really loved it, and luckily for designers, the majority of them, it worked really well. The model worked well. One of our highest sellers, for example, is one of my best friends, Al Wardle. He runs Any40, and he's an independent streetwear brand. And yeah, he did extremely well. His sales were always, really, really decent every month, and then it was only paying the £30 fee. So, in comparison to his other retailers, he was making a lot more money through us than he was through others. So it was great. It was working. The sad part of the story is that, unfortunately, because I didn't have a huge amount of financial backing, it was friends and family. I ran a really awful, not particularly good Indiegogo campaign that, after costs, probably only made us about £2,000, which didn't touch anything. It was wonderful, and I'm really grateful for everyone who supported me through it. But it was a big ask, because unless you were in Newcastle, of course, we weren't selling. We weren't selling a specific product. We weren't trying to take something to market. It was a place we were trying to create. So it was a big ask. The business, Who's and What's It, was dependent on me, on the income that I made from Branded by Naomi, which so it was difficult, to say the least. And unfortunately, because my time was so split as well, I think it was part of the problem. I had two really, really big projects, two massive projects fall through. And unfortunately, the remuneration with those also fell through. So I was kind of left at this point where we'd been open over a year and a half. We were doing really well. The subscribers were up to about 160, 180 subscribers. It was really, really great in terms of, the amount of designers that we had selling there. But I just couldn't make ends meet. Unfortunately, the cost, obviously, of running a physical store, and then at that point I'd tried to staff it only with 2 members of staff, but to try and be able to come out to then put the concentration that was needed on my design work, to work on those, to then bring in the money to do it. And yeah, unfortunately, the money didn't work out. And yeah, I unfortunately had to put my everything, as I called it at the time, and still think of it as, in a way, into voluntary liquidation. And
Right.
it was a really, really tough time, really tough. And to be honest, I think after that was in August of 2016. So yeah, since that 2016 to 2019, those 3 years, it kind of took me the 3 years up until last year to really sort myself out and know what I wanted to do. So it was a long recovery.
I'll bet.
Yeah, but I mean, I worked with some brilliant people in between. I was a part-time head of creative for child.org, a fantastic charity in London they have a team in London and a team in Kenya, and they work with babies and children and mums over in Africa, and they do wonderful work. And I also worked for a year setting up and being the lead designer for Little Inventors, which is by Dominic Wilcox, if you know him, working with kids and turning kids' invention ideas into physical, real things. And so I worked with them on building the brand from scratch. And then we also then did a book together as well, the first book, Little Inventors book, that went out. And other designers doing them now. I think they've got others in the pipeline, but I'm okay with that.
Nice.
I love helping people build the foundations, build the structure of things, and then let them run with it. So I did some amazing things in between that time, that recovery time, and things that I'll never regret. But it wasn't until last year that I really sat down and had to have a big think about, okay, look, I'm still working with wonderful clients, but I need to consolidate this. I need to understand exactly where I want to be, how I want to be perceived, and who I want to work with.
So, right, there's a lot in that, and obviously.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
No, it's good. It was a nice 5 minute version of it, I guess. So yeah, you went through the joys of building something that you really wanted to do, and it generally was for the greater good. All right, it
Yeah,
wasn't just self-satisfaction. There was part of that, but it was for everyone to benefit from. Obviously, you had all that effort to build the product, the Who's It What's It store, and it did all right, but it didn't have long legs on it. Basically, that's what it came down to. You had to take the pain of saying goodbye at some point, but your recovery was getting back into the stuff you enjoy again. So building brands with people that you love working with as well. So it sounds like you've worked out how to give yourself joy and what you're strong at, which actually brings, it's got legs, it's got longevity on it as well.
yeah, I'd agree. It's a difficult one because I continued to work with brilliant clients all the way through, and I loved the store, and I loved the community aspect of it, and I think that's the only thing now that only working on Branded by Naomi, that's what I then sometimes miss out on, is that community side. So that's probably something that I'm looking to extend out again in future.
Okay. So I think that probably goes into the next part of what's coming up. You've had some side projects. You've got your brand back into a shape you're happy with. Have you got any other side projects that you've got on the horizon that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, so I am currently working with, so another side of the business that's really, really helped and been working really well recently is I've partnered with Rose Radka. She's a fantastic creative writer, and she's brilliant at the verbal strategy of a brand. So we now partner on everything that we do. We love working together, and we improve on each other and from each other. So we work together as a team now, and she takes the lead on the verbal strategy of the brand, and I take the lead on the visual side. And it's wonderful because we do really, really immersive, lovely workshops with clients, and we do stakeholder interviews and lovely, wonderful work, and I love it. She is just as passionate as I am about side projects and wanting to, progress society in the same way as I am. And sometimes to our detriment with the current political climate. But
Someone's got to try.
yeah, so we often have lots of really great ranty conversations outside of our working our working environment. And so one of the things that we are actually working on is a publication that we are going to be pushing out hopefully in around April time, which is, it's driven from our kind of activisty side, and it's just to support an area of our industry that we see lacking. We see we're a bit frustrated by. So yeah, watch this space. I don't want to say too much because we're still working on the positioning, so she'll probably tell me off because I'll say it all wrong. Yeah, we're really excited about that. So yeah, hopefully about April we're going to bring out like a mini self-published publication, a zine if you like, and we're super excited about that, and we're hoping that we're going to just help support some people and also build a little bit of a community again around it. And that's a remote community, it's not a physical one, but yeah, we all need a little bit of love.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. It reminds me a little bit of Eight Faces. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Elliot J. Stock set up. Was that 10 years ago now? Must be. But the idea of just bringing together the community that you know so well and are passionate about, creating a tangible thing that you can share. And it does work. You might not have, a huge future, but it's something you can just enjoy for a period as well. So we won't go into too much because I know we can't share too much just yet, but I will definitely hold you account to that. You mentioned you obviously partner with Rose on all your work. So as someone who works as a freelancer in isolation a lot, I imagine, do you find that gives you an opportunity to share your thoughts and offload when you need to as well? Having people like that around you?
Absolutely, it's so good to have a partner in crime on things again. Another shift as well that I've just done is I've just moved into an office space instead of working from home, so which is great.
I'll bet.
Yeah, I mean, well, we're probably going to talk about this, but the last few years have been very strange for me because I have been living between and traveling between the UK and Canada for the entire last 3 to 4 years because I met my now husband and he was Canadian. And
Still is, but
we absolutely had to be, working from home. Both of us had to work from home because that was our only choice, because we were spending, 8-12 weeks, as long as we could manage, at each other's homes. And, there's no way we could fit an office or other outside working into that as well. Financially, but also just physically, it just didn't make sense. It wouldn't work. And both of us, James has actually ran his agency for exactly the same amount of times. Really strange. He also founded in July of 2010. So
wow.
We have both worked from home for a good while. James, fortunately, we finally got him over here last August, and he's now living here, which is amazing. And then, bless him, I landed it on him within a couple of weeks of him being here. So I think we should get an office space. And before even his ferry load of things had arrived in the country. But anyway, we looked at a number of spaces, and we both love it now. So we share a workspace outside of home. And honestly, work-life balance has been so much better since we've got it. I have not wanted to work on my client work when I come home. There is a dividing physical divide now, which I really, really love. So so that's helped a lot.
I'll bet. I mean, I love the fact you've got a shared interest as well. You both do digital design by trade and by passion. So it must be really hard to turn off though when you go home. If you've now got this shared space, you can confine your work to that time, but taking it home and turning it off must be really tricky.
Yeah, we don't really switch off from it. I mean, but in a positive sense of, yes, there's the stuff we do for clients, which now can stay in the office, which is lovely. But then outside of that, I think James even more so, but both of us will always want to do our own stuff, and progress ourselves creatively, and keep pushing, keep improving. I was just saying to James earlier, actually, I came across an old sketchbook that when I was doing some life drawing classes a few years back, and you can see like the beginnings, they're just all rubbish, like really, really bad. Like I'm not an artist, but really, really rubbish. And then you get to more towards the middle of the book, and actually you do see an improvement. There is a considerable improvement there, and then it's just nothing again, because I'd stopped going, or the classes had stopped. And that's a good metaphor for, or not even a metaphor, it's literal for what we do as creatives. Unless we keep doing and keep pushing ourselves to improve, we don't then improve, and we don't see improvement. And I think all of us are looking for, as creators, we're never truly happy with what we do. A lot of the time we look back and think, oh, I could have done that better. But that's exactly where we should be. We should always be wanting to improve on our skills and our output. So James and I often, we work on our own stuff when we come home. We talk about it all the time. So even, we'll have a cup of tea in bed in the morning, and we're talking about, these things that we're into, or things that we're passionate about all the time. And it's always something to do with his work. He's currently planning out an entire comic, for example. Nothing to do with client work, and everything to do with passion. And I think we would feel a bit lost if we didn't talk about that stuff and didn't have each other to talk about that too.
Cool. You talked about side projects a lot over the last couple of 10 minutes or so. I'm not sure if you're aware, we've got the On the Side community that I set up probably last summertime, which is for this, so people can go in and just share their side projects and help finish those side projects.
Yes, I heard you talk about it on one of your other podcasts. I must sign up. Yeah,
it'd be great to get you involved. But Sam Hardacre, who's part of that community, he's also trying to create a comic, and he's recently had a baby, like literally in the last month. So he's aware of his capacity, but he's still got these goals, and throughout the year to go, right, I've got to stand in this at this Comic Con, I've got this session set up. And I think giving him those sort of short-term goals help focus, even though you've got to be really mindful of capacity when you've got babies to look after, physical things, people, the harder part of life.
Yeah, keeping something alive is hard.
Yeah. So it'll be really interesting to see how James gets on with his comic, actually, because I've noticed there's a big rise of people trying to create their own things.
Absolutely. I mean, he's been passionate about it for a long time. He's started and not finished a lot of comics over his career, but this one is a definite shift in it will happen.
Are you going to be that wife? You're going to make
Yeah. Well, it's actually linked to another business that we have together. It hasn't traded yet, but this is part of the start of the world building, the storytelling, and building the background to this whole new world that we're creating. So again, sounds super secretive because I'm not allowed to talk about what we're actually going to do for the business.
Yeah.
But James he will be putting out the comic this year, and it's under the brand of Starcade. So James put out a number of small prints a number of years ago under the term of Starcade, and he drew wrestlers and all of his favorite wrestlers, and that went into other film geekery, and that's where it started. But actually we've ended up wanting to use the name and actually build a business from it. Nothing to do with his prints and where it was, but we've turned it into something else, and we've been working on it for the last 3 years really quietly, on and off. But again, sometimes these things do take time. We've got certain friends, like going back to Thomas, who are like, when's Starcade coming out, when's it happening, super excited for us. But we're like, yeah, actually we've put it on the back burner again for a little while because we're working on this thing, which is then feeds into it. And sometimes when you do your own projects, you can have that luxury of, we can totally take our time with this. There is no rush to market. It is a passion project, and let's take the time and make sure that it's as good as it can be, so that when it does come out in future, we don't then look back and regret what it is.
No, I know what you mean. Although I think you can fall into the trap of it never being perfect, because you are your own worst critic. So it might be worth getting feedback from others to go, this looks awesome, go, go, go.
Yeah. We've been asking family and friends their feedback, and we will be doing some proper, user testing and stuff in future. But for now, we're quite happy just working on it. It's a passion project now. Hopefully it'll be a business in future.
Nice. It must be great having a shared project with your partner, though.
It's wonderful. Yeah, we really love it. It's actually the only thing that we get. We don't really argue. We're one of those sickly couples that just don't really have. Both of us are so laid back and just like, well, what do you want to do? Oh, I'm easy. What do you want to do? But when it comes to this business, or what will be a business, it's the only thing that we get heated and argumentative about, which is brilliant, because we need that. We need to bring opposing opinions to it to make it the best it can be. But we laugh so much at the fact that it's the only thing that we argue over. It's great.
It's good. There's still a passion there as well.
Yeah.
Right, we've talked a hell of a lot about work, side projects and stuff like that. What the hell do you do to relax? I know you do walking, you like to take photos of landscapes. How the hell do you relax?
Yeah, to be honest, Si, this is something I'm working on, because I am such a workaholic that I forget that I need another side to my life often. So it's something that I'm continually working on. Well, James and I, we both go to the gym a lot. And now that we're in one place, the last few years, as I say, going back and forth, has been quite hard to have any sort of routine in our life. So now that we do, for the last 3 months, we've really loved the fact that we've got a normal, boring routine. So we've taken advantage of that, and going to the gym twice a week, simple thing. But and also going in the morning rather than evening, so I don't then make excuses of not to go. So going before work, feel really good. When I get to work, then you can just go home at the end of the day and it's done. And yeah, getting out for those longer walks. And I still love taking landscape photography, but that took a complete, it went on the back burner for the entire time from starting the shop back in 2013, 14, all the way to kind of recently, quite honestly, because life just took over in a slightly insane, manic way, in the way that then I wasn't taking photos for pleasure anymore. It was like, I need something to post. And I'm not one, I'm not a very good person on social media. I don't overshare. I don't really like sharing. I'm certainly not comfortable on camera. I'm quite I don't really like people knowing where I am. And I'm quite a private person. So in that context, I haven't done a lot of landscape photography for pleasure for quite a while. So this year, I'm actually really looking forward to getting back into it. So the few times that I have taken my camera out, aside from my iPhone, but when I've taken my actual camera out and spent time in places that I've visited, with the camera. I've loved nothing more. So it's definitely one of my resolutions to do that a lot more this year. And luckily I've got quite a lot of travel coming up this year as well, which also, it always helps. You know, if you've got something new to look at, you get so used to, you know, your own surroundings. I live in the northeast. It's beautiful. I'm 10 minutes from the sea. I'm 10 minutes from, you know, national parks and amazing mountains and countryside. Do I go all the time? No. And I absolutely should. But, you know, sometimes traveling is the thing that can then, you know, kick that back off again and get that passion back. So I always want my photography to be for pleasure, because I don't have enough things that I don't. I often say about myself that I'm quite bad in turning anything that I do into a business, rather than just keeping it as a pleasurable thing that I love to do. So yeah, I'm quite determined to do more of that this year.
I will hold you account to that as well. I hope that's not too far down your list of all the things to do and get it right back up the top. But at least
There's someone to hold me accountable for it, definitely.
I'll do my best. And yeah, going back on the point about you being quite, not private, I mean, you're doing this. So I feel privileged now that you're joining the podcast to put yourself out there and being very authentic about what you're doing as well. It's nice to hear some true feelings in what you're talking about. Some people, yeah, use it as an opportunity just to go, look at me, everyone, I'm amazing and you should work with me. And you're not doing that at all.
Yeah, I think I've always been very aware of that I never want to come across as that. And I think that's why I quit going back to, you know, the speaking stuff. It's why I questioned it so much in those past years of, why am I doing this? Am I doing it for the right reasons? I'm very aware of that. And these days, you know, with social media being the way that it is, and marketing being the way that it is, and everyone being on camera and everyone wanting our attention all the time, I might be, you know, a detriment to myself for that reason, because I'm not overly sharey or comfortable with everyone knowing what I'm doing all the time. But at the same time, you know, we only get one life, and we should live it in the way that we feel comfortable, and we shouldn't live it in the way that the current society or the current state of social media wants us to. You know, it is our life at the end of the day. And if we can get back, you know, I have wonderful clients, I earn, you know, enough money, and I'm happy with that. I don't then need to, you know, go out and scream and shout and get everyone's attention all the time. It makes me uncomfortable.
You said the perfect word there, you're happy. You know, you've been through all this stuff, you've learnt what you can and can't do, what you enjoy, and now you're happy. You're settled with James, Newcastle, and you don't need to worry about travelling and all that other stuff. So you sound like you're in a good place. I feel like we need to catch up again later in the year to see how things are going. But before I wrap it up, have you got any tips for anyone who's, you know, trying to get into the design industry, and what would be your number one tip that you wish you'd heard all those years ago?
I'm sure there's loads, but a couple of main ones. Make sure that you get as much experience as you can first before you start working for yourself, because we live in this world that, you know, we can do anything. We can become a YouTube star, we can work from home, we can play games for a living. That's all well and good, but actually the thing that you're going to get the most out of, and that's going to do you well in future, is understanding how a business works, or a structure works, or agency model, whatever it is that you're into, working for other people and taking as much as you can from them, and getting that experience and understanding their day to day, and it is really super important. And I sometimes I wonder whether that 6 years in industry was enough for me, and I often, you know, consider going back in and dipping my foot back in to think, you know, do I need a bit more of that? I think it's super important, and we shouldn't ever forget that, you know, just how much we can learn from that experience. Yeah. So do, you know, work for other people. Don't see that as a bad thing. That's a wonderful thing. Yes, if you want to work for yourself, that's great. Plan for it for the future, but have a plan first. And the only way that you can really plan good for that is, you know, is to get the experience from other people, see how other people do it right, but also see how they do it wrong. So yeah, I think that's kind of my number one for younger people trying to get into things. And then secondly, just don't try to just imitate other people. Try and find your own voice. I love, you know, I see a lot of younger people and designers getting into things, you know, imitating other people for practice, for skills, to get the skills that they want. And that's great. That's completely separate. That's wonderful. Do that as much as you can. Like, work on your skill level, that's wonderful. But when it comes to, you know, your own work and things, try not to look at other people and compare, or, you know, do the same things as other people. Just try and find your own voice. So I felt really uncomfortable about who I am for years, in terms of I saw myself as really boring, a really boring designer who likes systems. And what I've actually come to realize in my slightly older years is, no, that's great. I am someone who really, really enjoys constraint, who enjoys building out systems. I'm so meticulous about everything that I give to a client. For example, you know, a lot of agencies love that big thinking stuff, creating the initial brand and all of the different ways that we can push that out, you know, in the interiors or in murals or in, you know, the marketing campaigns. But they're not interested in building the templates that people use day to day, or the everyday stuff that they use. I love building that stuff for people. So as much as, and I've started to become more comfortable with that. And I think that's really important to start to realize, just look internally at what do you enjoy. So I enjoy physical layout, grids, systems, all of that kind of stuff. And I love one color simplified logo marks from, you know, the perfect stuff that, you know, it absolutely works as one symbol in black and white. Like, that's the kind of stuff that really, it turns me on. Love it. Don't try and then just run with that, or mix it with, I love photography, so what would it look like if I mix my photography with my design style? Try and find something that is natural to you rather than unnatural. So if you're really, really into I don't know, trolls, but you also love cycling, like, how can you use that in your creative work? You don't need to create, you know, pockets of things. You as a person are already interested, likely interested in a whole number of things. What does that mashup look like? Because everyone, you know, you are uniquely you. So what can you do with that?
Nice one. So be authentic, be true to yourself.
Yeah.
Use it to your advantage as well.
Absolutely.
Good work. We've run out of time, I think, so we should probably wrap it up. How can our audience get hold of you? Where should they look for your stuff, and what should we keep an eye out for?
Yeah, you can follow me at Branded by Naomi on Twitter and on Instagram, and it's brandedbynaomi.com to check out my work, and contact me at hello@brandedbynaomi.com.
Wonderful. We'll put all that in the show notes as well. Thank you ever so much for joining me today. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm hoping everyone that listens does as well. And I don't think we'll have you as a stranger anymore. We'll definitely get you back.
I would love that, Si. Yeah, you can check up on me. Thank you.
I'm not gonna do like that, lurky, but cool. All right then, Naomi, let's leave it there, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. Thank you to everyone for listening, and especially Naomi for joining me for this episode of the Make Life Work podcast. As Naomi suggested, she's available as Branded by Naomi on most social channels, or you could just email hello@brandedbynaomi.com. As we discussed, there's also our On The Side community network, where you can join me and some other side project fans to talk about what we're making. Head on over to ontheside.network to just join in that group. You can also find all the details about this podcast and other episodes on sidejobling.com/makelifework, or just look for Make Life Work on all the socials. We are also available on all the popular podcast apps, so make sure you subscribe, rate and review so we know what you think of it. That's all from me. Join me next time when I'll be inviting along another guest to talk about balancing their work, life and side projects on the Make Life Work podcast.